Well, Ryan, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here today.
Chris, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to dive in.
Yeah, well, Ryan, today we're talking all about the dreams in our heart, how to put a plan in action, and really how to step into the reality of those dreams. And I suppose I want to just begin by asking you, Ryan, what was your big dream?
My big dream, really from the moment I became a Christian, I was a worship leader and I was a musician, came from a musician family. And so I had always had this dream to be a part of worship events, kind of like worship-centered music events. And I wasn't exactly sure what it looked like. I didn't have a whole lot of details, but I was a worship leader, so I assumed maybe I would be leading worship at such an event. And at the time, it was the mid-'90s, so it was like Delirious and David Crowder.
I remember.
Chris Tomlin was like this brand new guy on the scene. And so I listened to those albums, and there was just really something that awakened inside of me. Yeah. And it was something that really sat there for a long time, over 10 years. And as the years ticked by, I kind of miraculously started working for David Crowder, started doing graphic design and art for Crowder. And I was in art school at the time and started doing his web design and all of that. And it was awesome and it was so cool, but it felt like I was so close to this dream yet so far away. It's like, okay, I'm a designer. I'm kind of in this world, but not really, And one day Crowder called me and he said, hey, can we do a conference? Would you mind doing graphic design for a conference called Crowder's Fantastical Church Music Conference in Waco, which is a very David Crowder name for a conference. And so I showed up and my friend Shane was there, and this guy that I'd kind of met once or twice before. And we were working together on the conference. And pretty soon, right after that, he called me and he said, I'm dreaming about doing an event called Outcry. And he said, I think I want to do like a worship leader conference. And that's where it started. And that started this conversation between him and I that lasted 4 years of us getting together. And he started working with Jesus Culture. So we started working with Jesus Culture. Then he started working with Hillsong United. And so we made all these connections. And for years, we just dreamed. We were like, what if we did this? What if we did that? Finally, one day he called me and he said, I just got off the phone with Joel Houston. He said he wants to do a tour in America, but he doesn't want to do a Hillsong tour. He wants to do a different tour. He said, what if we turned Outcry into a tour? And 4 months later, we had Hillsong United, Passion, Jesus Culture, Bethel. We took a big risk on a young artist named Lauren Daigle, who gave us her demo album. And a few months later, we were on the road and had 10 to 20,000 people a night. And it was just outrageous the way that it all came together. So that was the dream that God gave me from, the time I was 17 years old. And by the time I was 31, I started to see the fruit of that coming together. So, yeah.
I really appreciate you giving the span of time, Ryan, because I think a lot of times, and we'll just go here right away.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to compare our behind the scenes with everyone else's highlight reels. In other words, we look at what appears to be a lot of overnight successes. And I like to propose that's not the case. You had a really, if it was an overnight success for you, that was a really long night.
It was a very long night.
Yeah, walk us back into that process.
Yeah.
I tell people often, Ryan, the most important step we take in the pursuit of our passions and dreams is the first step.
Absolutely.
What was the first step for you?
The first step for me really was when I was in art school and I started thinking, if I'm going to do graphic design as a job, I probably need some clients that are going to be visible. And I sat down as a 21-year-old. We had just gotten married. My wife and I, we were young, got married. And I wrote an email to everybody that I could think of and said, I don't know who's doing your graphic design, but I would love an opportunity to do it. And the only person that got back to me was David Crowder. And Crowder got back and he said, hey, come up with some ideas and I'll look at them. And I remember that as being this moment for me of going, now I need to push in. Now I need to really show up for this. And I would stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning just designing this a website idea for Crowder. And at the end of a week, I knew, I'm like, I want to strike while the iron's hot. I'm like, I've got Crowder's attention. I don't want to let this thing go cold. So within a week, I sent him 2 website ideas. And he got back to me within a few days and he said, I love this first one. Let's go forward on it. And to me, it was this sort of, it felt real haphazard. It felt like, okay, I'm trying to get some traction. And I took some big, bold steps. I really look back and I'm going, it was kind of crazy. I mean, I started designing Crowder's website and I started to realize I don't know half as much as I think I know about designing websites, especially when I started getting all of Crowder's requests for what he wanted to do on it. And I just knew, I'm like, this is my moment. I've got to buckle down and I've got to work hard to pull this together. And honestly, it was that kind of bold email that set so much in motion for me, because within a few months, I got an email from a young worship leader and her mom, and her name was Carrie Job, and she said, I'm just
starting.
Never heard of her. Yeah. She said, I'm just starting out. I saw your work with Crowder. Will you do something for me? And so her first album, I did some graphic design work and web work for her, and it was just one of those things that from that kind of bold first move that actually seemed a little bit disparate from my big dream, it was moving kind of toward that. That was the thing that I really look back as like a market moment in my life. And I said, okay, like that is the moment when things started to shift for me. That was when I started to get contacts of people and started to steward relationships with people that I really had no business having relationships with had I not done that first thing. So that to me, I think was my big first step.
Ryan, I'd like to create a teaching point for all the listeners and all the viewers here on YouTube, of course. What I heard you say is that the thing that was in your heart manifested first in what was in your hands that day. And you stewarding that thing really well, keeping your eyes locked, keeping your eyes fixed, keeping your head down, however we want to break that metaphor down.
Yes.
What was in your heart was in your hands. Talk about stewardship and encourage the listeners and the viewers here today about that principle. What's in your heart is in your hands today, because that's really huge. It debunks the whole overnight success myth.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's so funny. I named my book Head in the Clouds, Feet on the Ground.
Exactly.
And Zondervan was like, it's kind of a long title. I said, I know, but I feel like we need that balance. It's like, obviously, as we get older, I've got 3 kids, and it's getting harder and harder for me to keep dreaming. I've got to kind of fight to keep that dreamer alive in me. But you have to take seriously the place where you're standing right now. You have to know where your feet are standing, and you have to treat that really, really with the diligence that you imagine you're going to be putting toward your dream. And I've seen so many people that really are kind of putting a half effort into where they are. And they're imagining like, hey, when that dream comes forward, then I'm going to really put 100% in. But having walked in it, the amount of effort you put into the small steps now really is a shadow and a foreshadow of what kind of effort and effort you're going to put into the dream when it comes around to you. Because by the time we did like 50, 60 outcries, it was really normal to me. And it started to become really, just kind of a normal job to me, even though we had tens of thousands of people showing up. And I saw that the way that you treat your current position really is a foreshadow of how you're going to treat your dream. And it's just vital. I've come across so many people that they're just not satisfied with where they're at, and they're just going, oh man, I deserve better. I need to, be. And what they inadvertently do is they stop treating right now with the kind of care that it needs. And especially if you believe in Jesus, it's like what God is building in you right now, this sort of act of faith of saying, I'm going to treat right now really seriously. It is an act of faith. Yeah. And you might have, a crappy boss or whatever it is. And the amount of effort you put into them, really, really matters. You look at the life of Joseph, like when Joseph, a man with a dream, that God gave him a dream, when he finds himself in Potiphar's house, he is a slave in Potiphar's house.
Sure.
I love it when it says that Potiphar saw him and said, I see that everything that you do succeeds and that God is with you. And he's putting forward effort in a place that really has no upward mobility for him. It's not like this great stepping stone to success for Joseph. He just really is treating that season in front of him with purpose and vision. And I think when we do that, I think God notices that. I think that really does determine where you're going to go, how you steward the moment that you're in right now.
Ryan, while we've not explicitly said it, I think one of the derailers along this way, and even to go into Joseph's story, is entitlement.
Oh,
can you unpack on entitlement? I'd love to know your thoughts on it and how it even kind of just distracts us and keeps us off course.
Yeah, I think entitlement really, it can be this cancerous sort of thing in our life. It can be this thing that just grows, and it's this thing that makes us feel like such a victim, you know. Ultimately, it's something that reduces our power. It reduces us to this thing of like, okay, I'm just a victim to all my circumstances, and I'm entitled to somebody else bringing something along to me. And honestly, it's just one of those things, and I don't know if just something my dad instilled in me. He was a small business owner or what, but I knew growing up, like, it is not someone else's fault. You always have something that you could do right now. And I do think we walk in that sort of victim mentality. And when we're sitting in a place just going, oh man, if only my boss would see me and give me this chance, or if only I was in a different job or a different church or had different leaders, or you get into this place where ultimately you are really getting stunted in your growth because all of your attention is on what you don't have. And what you miss out on is the attention to what you do have, kind of right back what we're saying, you know, like, and what you have in your hands really is meaningful, really is beautiful, it really is God-breathed. And that entitlement mentality, it really does. I've seen just so many people get stunted from it. They get lost years of this like victim mentality. And when you see people break out of it and you push them a little bit, it's amazing how much confidence they start to build and how much they start to realize it's not just like God doing everything. God also gives us stuff in our hands right now. He calls us co-workers with him, co-laborers with him. And the joy of working alongside God for kingdom-minded things, for dreams that God's given you, is just so beautiful. And when you can get your head above water enough from the victim mentality and realize I have something really meaningful that I could work on right now, it brings so much freedom.
We confuse movement for motion.
Yes. Yeah. It's like you're spinning your wheels, and I definitely see that. We work with a lot of college students, and I love them. I love being around college students because they're wide-eyed and they're dreaming. And it's just life-giving for me. Yeah. But at the same time, I see so many of them go, man, if only somebody would give me this sort of opportunity. And so many times I go, you have the opportunity right now. You're just not seeing it, you know? One of my favorite books is How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. And I think that
man, Clay Scroggins was brilliant in that book. Yeah.
Amazing. A really life-changing book, and honestly articulated things that I had thought of. And I always think a book is strong when you go, yes, I thought that, I just didn't know how to say it until I read it. Yeah. And his book was that for me. And that victim mentality, this sort of powerless, like, I'm always blaming the person ahead of me. At some point, you're going to be in charge, and you won't have anybody to blame.
That's good.
And you've got to be able to think about that now and go, okay, what am I responsible for right now? And I do have leaders, whether they're good or bad. I want to do everything I can to glorify God through the work that I have right now, even when I have a subpar boss. And again, it comes back to that belief that God is seeing what you're doing, that it's not all for man, it's not all for other people to notice how great you are. God is noticing what you're doing. So even when you're making your bad boss that may not be a great stepping stone for you happy, God sees that and honors that.
That's powerful, Ryan. I want to go right into actually the title of the book, because I'd love to have you kind of break it apart. Head in the clouds, feet on the ground. What does that mean?
For me, growing up, I was always a kid with my head in the clouds, and I was always thinking. I mean, you could kind of catch me at any point of the day, and my mom could attest to this. She'd have to call my name many times for me to respond, because I would just be thinking and dreaming and imagining, and so there was always that part of me that really came alive with that. And, my friend Shane, when we started Outcry, part of the process that was so beautiful for me was the dreaming. And we started talking about, what if we did a big tour? Well, that's awesome. But why do we want to do a tour? And we started diving deep into this heart for unity, this heart for the church. And those dreaming sessions, those head in the cloud sessions for me were so life-giving. And I love them so much. But at some point, we had to start. At some point, you got to start moving toward it. And we would finish these big dreaming sessions, and I would sit down, and it was actually me developing something that I still do to this day. I'll have a dreaming session, I'll sleep on it, maybe spend a couple of days away from it, and then I'll come back and I'll try to write down a quick synopsis of what we were dreaming of. And so we'd always do this. Shane and I would get together and we'd be dreaming, and a couple days later I'd get home and I would sit down and write like a little bit of an elevator pitch, like how would I explain this dream in 2 sentences? How would I explain it in a couple paragraphs? How much money do I need? How much time do we think it's going to take? Throw out some basics like that. And it's amazing how you can process when you write things down. And that was my feet on the ground sort of moment. And when I started writing this book, it was really funny because I think it's really easy post this big dream coming to pass to say, oh, well, God brought it and he did all the work and I was just, and all that's true. But I started to really realize as I was sitting down and writing, like, no, God's kind of wired me in a special way, like he's wired everybody in a special way. And I started to really appreciate myself, as weird as that sounds. And I started to go back and go, okay, what was my thought process? What was I thinking when I started working with Crowder? What was I thinking when I was coming up with these elevator pitches for Outcry? And what did I do 80 times that failed, for the one thing that did work? And really, ultimately, it came down to this. It's like you got to be able to lift your head above where you're at and go, gosh, Lord, what if this happened? What if I did that? Think outside of where you are right now in your current context. And then take the here and now really seriously and go, okay, what do I have in my hands to start moving this forward? Who can I call? Who could I email? Who could I text about this? Who could I reach out on Instagram? I mean, Instagram's an amazing networking tool. You could reach out to so many people. And I think when you have a real heart behind something, when you know why you're doing something, that sort of networking is really, really important. And oftentimes that's the thing that's in our hand. Who could I talk to? Who could I send an email to? Who could I reach out to? And so that's really ultimately the book for me came down to this tension between those two ideas. Like we have to balance those two in our life as we're pursuing God-given dreams.
Ryan, I'd love to ask you to actually step in to your own dream session process. Let's make this really practical. Will you walk us through what that looks like from conception to, as you said, you sleep on it, you jot down ideas, you create the pitch. Walk us through how to do a dream session.
Yeah. Well, it always starts, it's funny, I think, before you start dreaming with other people, it really does start on your own. So oftentimes I'll get a dream or an idea, and I will just write it down in my notebook. I'm in the habit of every morning I read, I reflect, I journal a little bit. And oftentimes if I feel like, for me, the weird time is always like between 1 and 3 in the morning. I feel like I wake up and go, this is a great idea. And I'll write it down in the morning. If I wake up and go, oh, that was crazy, then I won't write it down. But if I wake up and I go, no, I think there could be some legs to this idea, I'll write it down. And I saw this stat that you're 40% more likely to achieve something that you write down. It's that first act of faith of like, I'm going to actually put this down. And it almost makes you feel like you have a little accountability. Someone might read this later and go, what was he dreaming of? And you write it down and you get to see it in all of its, craziness. And oftentimes at the end of that, I'll say, okay, either I need to kind of sharpen the pencil a little bit more and get down to the detail, or I'll have somebody that comes to mind and I'll go, you know what, I really need to talk to so-and-so about this idea, because I'm never the full expert in this dream. Like Shane, coupled with me, he's running this production company. He's part owner in this production company. He lives and breathes this sort of thing. I didn't. But coupling him and I together was really, really powerful. So oftentimes I know my own weaknesses. I know like what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. And so I'll try to find somebody that kind of balances me out and reach out to them and go, what do you think? And a lot of times that is the scariest step, is verbalizing your audacious dream to somebody else. It's the thing where you go, man, this sounds really dumb coming out of my mouth right now, but this is what I'm thinking, and then oftentimes then I'll start kind of coalescing a group of people. Who's with me? Yeah. Is there anybody that's interested in, especially if you're looking to finance something, is there anybody that you know of that has some money that would be interested in financing something? Even if you're just starting with your parents or, a friend of a friend, is there somebody you could reach out to? But ultimately, there is that point where the rubber meets the road, where you're not having conversations anymore, and you really have to get it down on paper. And I think my background in graphic design helps me with this, but a lot of times I'll actually do graphic design. I'll make like a little logo or put something to it that makes it feel a little bit more official. And I really will put it down on one sheet of paper. I really do think in business, they call it the elevator pitch. You need that, like, what if I had one elevator ride with somebody important, how would I pitch this idea? And that was vital for me. And often that takes months sometimes. And I think, honestly, Outcry, it took years for me to get to that point where I could write 5 pages, no problem. To get it down to 1 page was like, okay, some of these things need to die in here. This is maybe a little too much, and boiling it down to your main point. And ultimately, then you need that pitch, and you need to be able to go to somebody and go, I want to do this. I'm ready to roll on this, And oftentimes that could be, you might get to that point and you might have years of knocking on doors before somebody says yes. But if it's resolved in your heart, if you've taken it to the Lord and you're like, hey, God, is this something you're putting your stamp on? And if you feel that green light, then do the due diligence to write everything down. Be ready for that day that you're standing in front of somebody that can green light your idea and pitch it to them with passion and clarity.
It's interesting, Ryan, because the overriding thing I've heard you say in the last few moments is that really dreams are a stewardship issue. Because the dream giver himself gives them to us as a stewardship, and by taking them seriously, by not just allowing them to sit in the cerebral land, so to speak, but instead putting a plan on paper, beginning to do the work, boots on the ground. I'd love to stay practical for a moment for everyone who's listening to this conversation who says, yep, I have this idea. Doesn't matter what industry or what space it exists in. I have this dream. I have this idea. What are some tools that you use? Maybe it's a Moleskine notebook, or maybe it's a set of key pencils, or like, what are some of the routine type tools that you use that help expedite the process of articulating the things in your heart? Just real practically.
Yeah. I do have a Moleskine notebook. That was a good call.
Sure.
I went to art school. Yeah. Every art student has.
Yeah.
So Moleskine notebook. I've got it. It's actually right here, never far from me. I have actually probably several of these going at any given time, kind of sitting around by my bed and sitting at my desk, where I have my quiet time and everything. I think one of the biggest things in terms of a practical tool is really just sitting down on my notes. I take notes on my phone too, and have it on my computer. And whenever I get that sort of like strike of inspiration, and this is the thing that's so important. Like for me, it's that self-awareness that's really, really important. That moment when I get an idea where I go, okay, I think that's good. I write it down immediately. Because I have had several ideas, and I don't know what they are because I didn't write them down. But I still think back on some times where I'm like, oh, that's such a good idea. And then I didn't write it. And I'm like, dang it, I should have written it down. So having that sort of awareness and being able to jump in and write. So yes, I have a Moleskine notebook. I have my phone on me all the time, like most people do. Pull out my notes section. I actually have a little folder in my notes that says dreams, and I write things down. And really, the other thing I think that's so practical is connecting and networking with people. And we kind of touched on it a little bit before. Yeah. But I think there's just this weird sort of, maybe it's like a false humility in people where they're like, I don't want to network with people. Like, I don't want to make a big deal out of myself. And ultimately, for me, I don't network to take advantage of people. I mean, I really network in the sense that the way that Jesus led was serving. And so
That's
whenever
good.
I'm networking with people, I start with like, hey, what can I do for you? I'm very slow to ask people for a favor. I wait for a relationship to build a little bit. I make sure that I'm going out of my way to post about your book or your podcast or whatever it is that the person that I want to connect with. And I really just see where that goes, and I start with serving them. But I started to realize how important it is, several years ago when I started meeting people, go out on tour with Bethel or Hillsong, and I go, okay, I have these people that I'm connected with. How I steward that is so, so important. And I think that is, to me, Instagram is a huge tool. I know all the kids are on TikTok. I have like 12 followers on TikTok. Instagram's
I'm not even there
tool.
yet. Yeah.
Oh, it was a weird, wild scene when I opened up TikTok for the first time. But Instagram still, for me, is such a huge, huge tool. I connect with people all the time on there. And so networking is a really, really important thing. So by the time you start to write your dream down, you start to really get it to the point where you're in that elevator pitch. Yeah. It's so helpful to have a list in your head of like, you know what, I really should contact so-and-so. And I've actually really seen the Lord do something interesting through that too, because I've had dreams. I'll sit down and a name will come to my mind and I'll go, wow, they're a little bit separated from this dream. Yeah. But I'll write their name down anyway. And the amazing stories, I've had a few of those where I'll contact them and they'll go, I don't know why you're contacting me about this. It doesn't make sense. And then 2 weeks later, I get a text from them and they're like, you'll never believe who I just talked to. And God is God, whether you're networking with people, or you're writing things down, or like still being attentive to like listen to what he's saying, having that ear to hear what he's saying in given moments is so vital. But I think that's to me is some of the most practical things I would say when you're starting to pursue a God-given dream.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
If it's okay with you, I'd love to stay practical because my mind's racing right now. I'd love to step into your daily rhythms because I think a lot of times life just demands that we execute, run the play.
Yeah.
How do you carve out intentional time to go into create mode instead of, for lack of a better word, edit mode?
Yes.
What does that look like?
I think so much of it is a good, healthy rhythm in life. And I talk about this a lot. I think you look at the Bible and God says, hey, take one day a week. And for me, if I'm not taking that day a week off, I probably have something out of whack or I'm at a pace that I can't sustain. So making sure you have these rhythms, these times off. But it's so funny as I'm getting close to 40 now, and I started to realize a few years ago, I was going, I don't even know what I do for fun anymore. I know how to get things done. I know how to achieve things. I know how to, I'm writing a book at the same time that I'm on tour and then I'm still working my 9 to 5 here. And there are so many things that I've got going on. And in the mix of that, I kind of lost something. And for me, it was that like being in touch with myself and going, what do I like to do? I was a musician, like I said earlier in the podcast.
Sure.
But at some point, I kind of stopped playing music. And when that went away, I was like, I don't know what I do for fun. And what's so funny is the last couple of years I've been doing like barbecue, which sounds really funny. And it sounds weird for an art student to say something like this. But I love like waking up early in the morning and like getting something going on the barbecue, something where I have to like cook it for 12 hours. I've realized that those are the kind of things that I just need sort of like deep like relaxation, this distraction from getting things done, something that's just really enjoyable for me. That I think on a fairly regular basis, on like a weekly basis, is just so important for me. On a daily basis, I have a lot of different things that I do. And one of the things that I've started in this last season is taking some very purposeful quiet time in the morning. If you've been a Christian for a long time, you've heard the phrase quiet time. And so I sit down and read my Bible or whatever.
Sure.
What I started to do, though, is I started to shift it a little bit. And this has been really, really good for me lately. But I pause and I kind of go through my senses. Like, what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I smelling?
Yeah.
Really start to be aware of what kind of input is coming in. Then I take it another step and I go, what am I thinking about? Is that making me feel powerless or powerful? Is it making me feel like a victim or a victor? How am I feeling with that? Is it causing stress in my shoulders? Just even this like deep sort of self-awareness. And the amazing thing was, and this is just a few months ago that I started doing this, I started writing things down in my journal, and I started writing things about myself that I started to realize, like, oh, I think this about me. Like, I think this bad thing about me, and I have not really been aware of it. And just simple things, like some of the things I wrote down is, I feel like I'm a bad friend, or I feel like I'm not great at conversation. These things that I was going, I didn't know I thought this about myself until I took some time to be self-aware. And honestly, that was something that, and it doesn't die there, it goes into prayer from that point on and going, God, help me to unsee these things in myself. Help me to unravel these things I see in myself. But those have been some rhythms for me. Every single morning I wake up, and I wake up at 5 in the morning because my kids are going to be up. I need a good hour and a half to myself. And that is my only time to do that. Get my cup of coffee and I rest. And so those are really, really important rhythms for me. And that self-awareness really does. It's funny. I don't know. I do have moments where I sit down and I go, okay, I want to plan out when I'm creative. And I do that. But sometimes, too, that self-awareness leads me to times where I go, I'm feeling really creative right now. And do I have something important going on? No, I need to go in my office. I need to shut the door and I need to do some writing. And honestly, I think that's been something that I've cultivated a lot of, that sort of self-awareness, that knowing when you're in a creative space. For me, mornings are my creative time. Do not ask me to have any sort of dreaming sessions in the afternoon. I am purely email and just getting things done, in the afternoon. But in the morning, I'm like, I just feel like I'm way more aware and way more creative, So I don't know if that answers that question.
No,
so,
it really does, because it's good for everyone joined with us to simply see in a practical sense what another person's rhythm looks like, so that they can perhaps extrapolate and go, okay, I know how to employ the simple everyday demands that are upon my life, etc. I'd love to drill down on self-awareness. I had no intention of going here in the conversation, but you're just leading this so well. Self-awareness, I believe, is critical. In fact, I just wrote an article for Success Magazine a couple weeks ago, and in it I was talking about the gift that self-awareness is, but then really the key that turns the lock is self-knowledge. So it's like we're texting while driving. Self-awareness says, yes, I was texting whilst driving. Yes. But then self-knowledge comes into play to say, why was I texting and driving in the first place? So self-knowledge forces us to explore our motivations. So I suppose the question I'd love to ask, Ryan, regarding self-awareness is, when you've employed self-awareness in your life, how has that kept you in the area of convergence, your passion, your talent, combined with a market need versus going, I'm passionate about this, but I have no skill in this area. Like, I'm a 5'7" white guy. I'm not going to play in the NBA.
Yes.
Talk about how self-awareness plays for you.
Yeah, it's a really big deal. And I think number one, we've all come across those people that are not self-aware, and they're kind of, elephants, or, what's the phrase, in a china shop, bulls in a china shop. There it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we all have seen those sort of people, and you're around them and you go, you're not watching the room. You're not aware of what you're doing. And I think my self-awareness started there. I started to realize, like, when I'm sitting in a meeting and I'm pitching an idea, the rhythm that I talk, how I pitch it, the words that I use. I would notice I would say a word in a group of people and they would twinge at it. And I'd go, ooh, I probably should stay away from that area when I'm talking to them, And I think that was kind of like the gut level self-awareness that was pretty important when it came to interacting with people. But then there's that step deeper where, like, if you're only good at that self-awareness, then you're really good at faking. Like, you're really good at telling people what they need to hear. That is the first level. You need to go deeper than that. And honestly, that's where I start to go, just like you said, what are my motivations? And that's why one of the things I ask myself in the morning is like, what am I thinking about? Does that make me feel powerless? Does that make me feel powerful? Does it, does it propel that sort of victim mentality? Am I running a tape in my head about a conversation I should have with so-and-so? And at some point, is that helpful anymore? Do I need to have a conversation with them? Have I already had that? Then I should probably be self-aware enough to go, I'm going to shelf that sort of, mind rut that I'm creating around this problem. And motivation is such a big, big thing. And start to drill down, and you're like, I yelled at my kids this morning. Well, why did I yell at my kids this morning? Well, I was pretty stressed. Well, why was I stressed? Well, I got this thing coming up. Well, what is that telling me that I'm thinking about this thing, And I am so classic and I'll do that all the time. Yell at my kids. I think about it later and I go, I was really stressed about this thing. And the further I drill down into it, a lot of times I go, ultimately, I find myself in this place where I go, can I control that? No. Then I should stop worrying about it. Can I control it? Yes. Okay, well, then what can I do to start making it better? Those are the sort of things, that self-awareness is so, so key. And you just interact with those people that have that sort of, that EQ, that, emotional intelligence is sort of like they're aware of themselves, they're secure in who they are. A lot of times we just think, oh, they must be born with that or their parents must have given them that. Yeah. But it really is a skill just like anything else that you can employ. And it's funny, I started reading a book called Turn Your Brain On. Have you heard of that book?
Oh, yeah.
It's a very good book. Yes. Oh, man. And it's that idea when she says, your self-awareness actually shifts your attention to like the frontal lobe of your brain. You start to really shift attention into like a healthy part of your brain, and you're not operating from this sort of like gut instinct emotion all the time, but you're able to get outside of yourself and go, oh, that's interesting. I'm really mad about this thing. Why am I really mad about that? That book for me was so life-changing when it came to self-awareness. But it really does create this emotional health that is so, so key for us. When you start pursuing big dreams, it's going to get really hard at some point. When we took Outcry off the ground, we were burning through $1 million a week. And we had 12 buses and 4 semis. And I had never been under that pressure. I had been like normal guy, sort of salary, just kind of trying to pay my bills. Yeah. Thrown into this place where I'm sitting down with people who are going, hey, we're giving you $50,000 a night, and I feel like you're not giving us enough time on stage. And things that I had no idea I was going to face. And it was extremely difficult. And I remember when I came back from the first tour, I told my wife, I said, Outcry was awesome, but I would be happy to never do it again, And what I didn't realize in that time is that I had been kind of pushed to this breaking point. Yeah. And I think a lot of us get to that point and we go, okay, like our prayer becomes, make this easier for me. This is way too much. I can't handle it. What I found myself shifting into was a little bit of a different prayer. And it was, God, expand my capacity to be able to take this new thing that you're giving me. And what I found after 2 or 3 tours was, oh, I'm actually able to handle this. It's the same amount of stress. Actually, we're burning through more money faster, but I'm able to handle it a lot more. Self-awareness was a huge thing. Sticking to it was a huge thing, but like ultimately we're all going to get into that place where we're pushed kind of to our breaking point. And emotional health is the thing. It's like that lifeline that's going to keep us alive in the midst of it.
Let's stay there for a moment, because I think one of the things that the folks listening could encounter, probably will encounter, because I know I have, and you just shared that you did, is if we're not stewarding our mental and emotional health, we get to the place of perhaps even resenting the dream.
Yes.
Like, God, I wish you would have never given me this thing in the first place, and it's ruined my life. And then I feel like there's a chance we take 15 steps backwards and we're in a worse spot than when we began. Any thoughts about that? I think about resenting the dream and how real that is.
Oh, it's real. Yeah. And like I said, that first tour, I mean, about 5 stops into this tour, I was going, all right, the novelty is worn off. Standing in front of 10,000 people doesn't feel that amazing anymore.
Right.
And you start to look around and you go, so-and-so over there, their marriage is falling apart. So-and-so over there, they haven't seen their kids in 2 years. And you're going, I don't want to do that. That was not part of my dream, was to see this kind of ugly underbelly. And it is so true. You could get to that point where and I've always said this, pursuing your dream is going to be the hardest thing that you've ever done in your life.
Yes.
Outcry got to the point where I really was spontaneous. I'm not a crier normally. Yeah. And on Outcry, I would spontaneously start crying. And I had people go, "What's wrong?" And I'd go, "I don't even know." Like all of it, all the stuff. I miss my kids, the pressure of, and it is that thing that is so, so difficult. And I was thankful that up until that point, I had really valued emotional health and spiritual health. And by the time I got there, I was going, okay, I'm almost at my breaking point.
Yeah.
But I am not going to choose to self-medicate in the way that I see people around me self-medicating, And you get out on tour and it's everything, from drinking to sex to anything else. Yeah. It's like that's when you get into this really, really unhealthy place of trying to deal with this pressure. Emotional health is that sort of lifeline that keeps you in that place where you go, and go, okay, I know I'm going to get pushed. Expectation is everything too. I mean, I think if you expect to go into your dream and you're like, it will be everything I imagine it will be and more, you will be really, really let down when you get there and you realize, okay, this is a dream come true and I'm so thankful for it, but it doesn't maybe feel like I thought it was going to be, but that's okay. I'm stewarding it, like you said earlier, and I think that that's such an important thing. It's like I'm stewarding this dream, this understanding that I'm created on purpose, that I've been given gifts on purpose and dreams on purpose, and it's not just so that I could have fun and feel great about it. It's so that I can make a huge impact here based on how I'm created. And when you look at it that way and you go, okay, I don't own this dream. This dream is not me. If it fails, then it fails. But I want to steward this dream the best that God gave me. That sort of thing is so important because you will get to that point where you're like, okay, the novelty wore off. Yeah. This dream doesn't feel that fun. I had no idea this kind of pressure came along with the dream. And that's the point where you have to really, really rely on this foundation that you build before you get into that dream.
Ryan, when stress turned into distress,
yes.
How'd you cope? What'd you do?
For me, I think that the main thing was I started to really kind of step back into, again, that's kind of self-awareness of going, what is taking me to this breaking point? Yeah. What can I do to alleviate that? Some of it was I had felt this pressure to be on all the time, and it was just like this practical where I would realize I'm starting to fall off the deep end a little bit, and it's 2 p.m. and we don't start until 7. I feel like I need to be around everybody all the time, but I don't. I'm going to go back to the tour bus and I'm going to go take a nap, Those sort of things were so vital, especially in this sort of wild world that touring is. And, we're really on from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., or 12 p.m., and it's a long, long night, And I just started to realize, like, Ryan, it's okay. Like, sometimes we put pressure on ourselves. Like, we think as a leader, you have to be around everybody constantly all the time. But no, you don't. Sometimes you have to just trust and go, okay, this whole thing doesn't, die on my shoulders. I have some great people I could rely on. I have God I can rely on. Yeah. I better go take a nap. And I started learning that. And by the time the third tour came around, I was like, oh, hey, it's nap time. I need to go. It's 2 p.m. I'm tired. We're about to start Outcry here in a few hours. Sure. I better go get some rest, And then I think the other thing is really the first thing that fell off my plate was getting a little bit exercise. The first thing that fell off my plate was sitting down and reading the Bible, because I'd wake up with 80 text messages and go, oh, I got to be on. Everybody's expecting me to do something. Sure. And I just got into a rhythm, and I realized when I started like going, hey, I'm not going to respond to a text message until 9 a.m., the entire team started to realize, Ryan's not even going to respond anyway. Let's wait till 9 to send him a text. That's good. And I started creating this rhythm where I was going, okay, this is when I'm accessible. This is when I'm not accessible. And I think in my day-to-day, it was okay to hold those lines. On tour, it was this whole new level of like, I have to really build some thicker walls and some really clear times that I'm not available. But rest rhythms, all of that stuff. When I was about to break down, I realized half of it, we're sleep deprived or, something's going on. And you realize like there's something so simple as maybe going out for a run or taking a nap that might go, okay, now I'm reset, not feeling like the world is over anymore, starting to feel a little bit more hope, and I could dive in,
Ryan, back to the content of the book, we've talked about it a lot, and I'm so glad the conversation actually went in this direction. It's the passion of my heart for people that are saying, okay, I'm lining all the details up and I'm trying to figure out which direction to move in. How do we know the difference between a dream and a pipe dream?
I think a lot of it does fall on that self-awareness. And we didn't really talk about this, but knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at is really, really important. For me, I realize I am not an organized person. I have an assistant that can help me stay organized, and I need to rely on the assistant to keep me organized. There are other things that I just have to realize, like I'm a good dreamer, I'm good top level, but I'm not good when it comes to putting process together or coming up with things like schedule and who needs to do what. And I realize there are people around me that are built uniquely and beautifully, that God built them on purpose to be these kind of people that are very organized. And I changed it from, I used to feel so bad going, hey, could you organize my schedule? And I've come across people who were like, I love doing that.
Yes.
Like, don't come at me like it's this huge thing. Like, I actually like to do that, Ryan. I'm not like you. And being aware of that, going, oh, okay, like now I know where to shift. Pipe dreams, I think, come along where you're not really self-aware, you're not getting good feedback. I'm a huge fan of feedback. Whenever I design something, writing a book, you've got to send it to an editor. They're going to shoot it full of holes, and I love that process. I actually hate that process, but I love the fruit of that process. And that's shooting some holes into something that you're like, oh, yeah, this is great. This is going to work. And somebody goes, no, Ryan, it's not, and being able to hear that and understand that and believe that and know what you're good at and know what you're not good at is so key. So
that's really good. That's really good.
Yeah.
Ryan, one of the sections of the book that I really enjoyed and I want to touch on before we land the plane here today is just a few dream killers. And you started that section of the book talking about the critic. Talk about the critic with us. We have an external critic. We have an internal critic. I tend to believe that the internal critic is 10 times louder than the external, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So the critic for me was, it was the very first dream killer I thought of because it is the thing that we all face. And I've mentioned a few times that I went to art school, and honestly, I think I really honed in on the ability to hear a critic in art school. Because you pour your guts out into this piece of art that you make, and the teacher is really drilling into you, like, you got to make something that makes a statement that's not just beautiful, but that says something, And that first time you put that piece of art in front of people, and then they all go, meh, I don't know. This looks weird, or that looks cheesy, or you start to develop, either you drop out of art school, or you start to develop this sort of thick skin and this ability to kind of get outside of yourself and go, okay, this piece of art that I made is not me, just something that I made, and I can make another one, And you start to really hone in on, okay, what are the critics that are worth listening to, which I talk about in the book. There are critics that are worth listening to. Sometimes they deliver it to you in a terrible way that really hurts your feelings, and when you take a step back, you go, but they're right, Those are very real things. And so paying attention to the critic that might be good is really, really important. But then there's the bad critics. There's the critics that come alongside you and that really just want to derail you. Like it's this attitude of it's like they're just trying to knock you down a peg. So the critics, those are the ones you really the ones you need to ignore are the ones that are really not giving you anything usable, that's not making you better. And I think a lot of us can tell. There's this sort of like, okay, I think you're just trying to knock me down a peg. But I think the real danger starts to come in play when your external critic starts to become this internal critic, like you said, this really loud voice. And sometimes we can't even pinpoint where it started. We can't pinpoint, like, was it something that my dad told me? Was it something my grandma told me, or a teacher? But there's these things that we start to think about ourselves, and we go, I'm not good at that, or I'm not good at that, or who am I to do such a thing? And it's not something that's breathed from God. It doesn't come from a real healthy place of identity or secure identity. It comes from a place of insecurity. And like I was saying earlier, when I started to listen, you take some time to listen for these voices, and you go, what am I saying over myself every day? Like, I'm saying, I'm not good at this, or I'm not good at that. Growing up as a musician, I was always so confident playing music. When Outcry came around, I had to start speaking in front of people. And I was going, this is not my natural gifts. Like, what am I doing? And I heard so many voices in my head saying, you are not good at speaking. You should just give it up. You're not articulate. You're not good at that. And just to be able to step back and go, no, maybe I am. Maybe I am equipped. Like, maybe I should be confident not in my ability to do this, but in my calling to do this. And those are some really big shifts for me of going, okay, God, you're calling me to take new ground. I have new skills to learn, but I have to get over this internal critic that keeps telling me I'm no good at this thing that you obviously want me to do. So if you want me to do it, I need to start walking and believing that you're going to equip me to do it. And that is where you start to really conquer the internal critic.
Yeah. Any practical steps? How did you do it? Practically, what did that mean for your rhythms with the Lord and your devotional time? Like, any tips?
Yeah, I started to really hone in on, again, where I was getting my identity from. And identity is something I think that is very, very key. It's this sort of foundational thing for anything that we're going to do for God. And really starting to look at, again, like that confidence in your calling is that identity piece of going, I've been created for a purpose. And it's so much bigger than just like an Enneagram number. Like right now we have people, I'm an Enneagram 3, and everyone goes, oh, you're an Enneagram 3. You just want to like accomplish things. And it's like, well, yeah, kind of, but there's so much more to me than that. There's so much more to us than just a number. And really starting to dig down and appreciate, like, okay, this is how I'm created. This is where the voice of the critic starts to get a lot quieter in our life, And I think it's a daily struggle. I still feel like I battle that internal critic that says you're not good at this, or you're not good at that. But that daily, that daily pursuit of, okay, God, what are you saying about me? That daily pursuit of what lies am I believing about me, that is so, so key when we're really trying to build proper identity around who we are.
Oh, that's so good. Ryan, I got to tell you, I've really, really, really enjoyed even the trajectory of the conversation today, because I believe in dreams. I believe in the one who gives us dreams. But I think the deeper thing that is been an encumbrance to many people is this conversation and the tenets of the conversation that we've had today, talking about mental and emotional health, talking about self-awareness and boundaries. And so very, very appreciative for your vulnerability, and thanks for having the conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Chris, thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome.
I just pray that it's an encouragement to everyone watching, and that there's a lot of dreams that are released and pushed forward because of the book. So
absolutely, Ryan. Hey, before I let you go, how can everyone connect with you?
Read headintheclouds.com is the place that Zondervan has set up. So it's a great place to go. Right now it's available for pre-order, but I think by the time this one is out, it'll be out
available.
Officially.
That's right.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's out on Amazon and everywhere else. And social media is at Ryan Romeo. And everyone goes, is your name really Romeo? And I said, yeah, yes. So at Ryan Romeo on Instagram really is the best place to connect with me on social media.
Got you right there, guys. Go do it. Ryan Romeo on Instagram. Go follow him. He's there. Ryan, anything before we end our conversation today, anything else on your heart that you want to leave with the listener? It's all you.
Yeah, I think really, like I said, my prayer, there's so many times in the middle of this book that I was going, what do I want out of this book? I started really thinking, who am I writing toward? And my heart really is for the people that are pursuing this audacious dream, this thing that you're like, I have no business pursuing this dream, to really understand that they are created specially for a purpose, that their dream is not their own. It's something that God has given them, and that they would be released into seeing far more than they could ever ask or imagine when they really set their eyes on Jesus and they set their eyes on dreams that he has breathed in their lives.
That's good. There's a grace on your life, Ryan, for this. As you were saying that, I'm like, oh, he's prophesying into the hearts of people's dreams, and there's just a grace on your life. I just want to say that publicly. I feel like there's a grace on your life that the Lord has said, I've given this one the ability to see beyond natural limitations, natural proclivities, so that you could step into things that, here it is, point to the nature of our God.
Yes. Yes, so, absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris. That means a lot. Yeah, that means
you're
a lot.
welcome. Yeah. Ryan, thanks again for having the conversation. I am so thrilled to have had you here today. So,
thanks, Chris. It was really fun.